We don't know what happened with Charlie Kirk. And by no means am I saying like, the Israelis did this or any of that, but I'm saying there's a lot of unanswered questions there. Charlie Kirk is killed publicly in a very horrific way, and we're not really even allowed to look into that at all. And Charlie Kirk was one of President Trump's closest advisors, and he also advocated heavily against a war with Iran. He was in the Oval Office in the lead up to the 12-day war.
Your office had been blocked from investigating his murder. That does not make sense to me.
Welcome back, folks, and buckle up. We're diving deep into a rabbit hole today that makes Alice's adventures look like a walk in the park. Joe Kent, a man who knows where the bodies are buried, sometimes literally is blowing the lid off of what he calls a deep state cover-up. And trust me, when a former counterterrorist director starts talking about blocked investigations into a Trump advisor's assassination, you better believe we're going to listen. This isn't just about Charlie Kirk. It's about who really runs this country. Let's roll the tape.
Joe Kent, who just resigned from his post as the director of national counterterrorism, or as the head of the National Counterterrorism Center, had a lot to say about the assassination of Charlie Kirk, and more importantly, the lack of robust investigation that he is alleging is a huge problem when it comes to the death of Charlie Kirk. Cenk, people like Candace Owens have been made out to be completely insane because she isn't buying the official narrative. She's doing her own investigation, which of course she's not a professional in this field, so she's going to run into some weird, wacky theories. But do you begrudge someone for not buying the official narrative?
Whoa, hold on, folks. Let's wait a second. A close advisor to the president publicly assassinated and an investigation is blocked? That doesn't just not make sense. That screams cover-up louder than a foghorn in a library. This isn't some random street crime. This is a national security event, a direct attack on someone in the president's inner circle, especially one who was pushing back against major foreign policy initiatives like the war on Iraq. When the supposed deep state moves to immediately shut down inquiries into such a high-profile death, it's not just because they found all the answers. It's because they don't want the right questions being asked. It's a classic move, folks. Control the narrative, suppress dissent, and make anyone who questions it look like a conspiracy theorist. But when the person questioning it is a former head of counterterrorism, guess what? Maybe we should be listening.
No, so I don't know what happened because we don't have access to the evidence that the government has access to. Candace doesn't know what happened. But when reporters tell us, shut up and bow your head to the government, that tells us that it's definitely Tyler Robinson. Well, I normally don't do that anyway. But when the director of the National Counterterrorism Center says that people inside the government blocked an investigation of the murder, now I don't believe anyone at all.
Folks, and that right there is the million-dollar question. When the guy who literally ran the National Counterterrorism Center, who has access to all the intel, says the government shut down his investigation into a political assassination, your trust in any official story evaporates faster than a snowflake in July. This isn't just a guy saying something. First, it's an insider. Secondly, it's a professional. And third, really, it's someone whose job was to protect us. Telling us the system is rigged? Wow, that's amazing. It's like your mechanic telling you your brakes are fine, but then your trusted, highly skilled mechanic friend says, dude, they actually stopped me from checking your brakes. Who are you gonna believe? This isn't about partisanship. It's about fundamental integrity. When the government actively obstructs justice on such a grand scale, it's not a conspiracy theory, folks. It's just a conspiracy.
And if you tell me, oh, Jake, that's conspiratorial, I don't care. You can stuff your conspiracy theory accusations up your ass. Okay. So no, we should find out what actually happened. And maybe Joe Kent's telling the truth, maybe he's not. But right now, if he's telling the truth, then they're hiding what happened to Charlie Kirk, and you should be livid about that.
So I personally don't think he's lying, because what do you get out of lying about this? But nonetheless, here is Joe Kent describing the final interaction he had with Charlie Kirk before he was killed.
Last time I saw Charlie Kirk on this earth was in June in the West Wing in the stairway, and I said hi to him, and he looked me in the eye, and he said very loudly, and it's a small. You've been in the West Wing. It's small. It's a tight space, and he said, "Joe, stop us from getting into a war with Iran." Very loudly.
He was single-minded.
And he walked off, and he went, I believe, into the Oval. So when one of President Trump's closest advisors, who is vocally advocating for us to not go to war with Iran and for us to rethink at least our relationship with the Israelis, and then he's suddenly publicly assassinated, and we're not allowed to ask any questions about that.
Okay, folks, let's connect some dots here, shall we? You have a top advisor to the president, vocally and passionately advocating against a war and suggesting a reevaluation of a critical foreign relationship. Then, poof, he's publicly assassinated. And the response from the powers that be? Nothing to see here. Move along, folks. It's always too perfectly convenient for those who wanted the war or those who didn't want their relationships questioned. This isn't just a tragic death. It's a chilling message. It tells anyone who dares to challenge the established foreign policy consensus, step out of line and you might end up like Charlie Kirk. It's a stark reminder that in Washington, some narratives are simply too powerful to be questioned, and some truths are too inconvenient to be revealed. And that, my friends, is the deep state at work, protecting its own agenda.
So in the aftermath of Kirk's assassination, Kent was tasked with investigating what happened. Fascinating. So what's even more interesting is how quickly that investigation got shut down. Take a look.
What do you mean when you say we're not allowed to ask any questions about that?
We've been told that this individual, Robinson, is a lone gunman, and maybe he is. But the investigation that I was a part of, the National Counterterrorism Center was a part of, we were stopped from continuing to investigate. And the FBI will say that they stopped that because they wanted to turn everything over to the Utah state authorities. Everything's going to trial. It's very, very sensitive. But there was still a lot for us to look into that I can't really get into. But there was still linkage for us to investigate that we needed to run down. And I'm not making any conclusions. I'm not saying
no, I don't think you are.
Because of this happened. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying there's unanswered questions. We know the pressure because of the text messages that have been made public that Charlie was under a lot of pressure from a lot of pro-Israel donors. And again, we know Charlie was advocating to President Trump against this war with Iran. And we knew at the end of the 12-day war, at the end of Midnight Hammer, that the Israelis were going to come back and ask us to go back to war again.
Right.
So we have a lot of data points between Butler, the assassination attempts against President Trump, the breaches of his security, what happened to Charlie Kirk.
So the allegation that Kash Patel shut down the investigation that was being carried out by the National Counterterrorism Center because he wanted to hand everything over to local authorities in Utah really makes no sense if you're wanting to look into possible foreign ties to an assassin, right?
Yeah. So, guys, this is not a little weird.
This is very weird.
When your counterterrorism center says we'd like to investigate some leads that we have about this enormously important political assassination in the country, and the other part of the government says, no, you're not allowed to investigate counterterrorism, you're not allowed to investigate anything about this murder, and you're to shut up and believe the official story, and they say that within the government. Nah, no, that is incredibly strange. And if you see some idiot so-called reporter telling you that's not strange, you should make sure to never listen to them again.
Now, after he decided to step down from his position, we're now learning that there has been some sort of investigation launched against him. We don't have too many details about it, but apparently it's an FBI investigation, according to 4 sources who spoke to Semaphore. They stated that the investigation began prior to Kent's resignation, One source said the investigation has been ongoing for months. Now, why? Why would they be investigating him? Allegedly, they suspect that he had been leaking from within the administration. Kent is accused of leaking confidential information. So, here's what I think about the notion of Kent being a leaker, and he might be. Who knows? I think the administration does a pretty good job showing us what they are. They don't really hide it. I mean, have you watched one of Pete Hegseth's press conferences? Total disaster. You don't need to leak anything. You guys show us exactly who you are every single day. Yeah. Total mess.
Yeah, no, I'm gonna go further. So we get pro-Israel leaks nonstop from the government. Barak Ravid is a pro-Israel leak machine. So how come none of his sources are being investigated? Oh, if you're in favor of Israel, no one gets investigated. But if you're concerned about Israel, oh, we're gonna have to launch a big investigation. Did he do it? Who knows? It doesn't matter. Because even if he didn't do it, would the Israeli forces inside our government start an investigation? Absolutely. Because if you're, and look, Tucker said the other day that they apparently they're considering an investigation and an arrest of him. Oh, it's just coincidentally happens to be all the people opposed to war and opposed to Israel. And our moron reporters go, no, that's a coincidence. It's always a coincidence, right? And it's also a coincidence that the million pro-Israel leaks have never been investigated, right? So, all right, now let's talk a little bit more, because Kent also mentioned that the shooting of the president, Donald Trump,
right,
when he got shot in the ear in Butler, there was also irregularities there.
Right.
Okay, and there was irregularities about a guy that they arrested a couple of days beforehand.
Actually, I covered some of those irregularities from what we were hearing from the federal government and what the reality was on the show a few months ago. And Tucker Carlson did a deep dive on it. And so my coverage was based on Tucker Carlson's deep dive. But one of the things that they were saying about Crooks, Cenk, was that he had no online footprint whatsoever, nothing at all. Turns out, no, he had a lot of activity online. Why were they lying to us about that?
So, wait a minute, that guy took a shot at Trump. And then there are people inside the government going, no, we're not talking about that. Don't ask questions about that. No, we get to ask questions about anything we want. And how incredibly strange is it that in the Trump administration, they're bottling up an investigation about shooting Trump?
So weird, yeah.
If you're, guys, the reason I get so frustrated by cable news and legacy media is they look at that and they go, no, that's not strange. All right, and by the way, here's another thing that happened, according to Kent. Trump ordered the release of the JFK, RFK, and MLK files, and he says they didn't release them all. There's really sensitive information in there that has not been released, even though in this case, Trump ordered the release. They just ignored the president. They said, no, that stuff we're not releasing. So who's in charge of this government? Look, before, and I'll give the right wing credit on this, I thought the talk of deep state was—
No, they were so right. You guys were so right. You're so right. I wish I understood what you were talking about, okay? But now I get it, and I really get it, and they were right.
So, yeah, I was gonna say I thought you guys were crazy, and no, you're not crazy. I know that there was for example, there's other countries that have deep states. That's a real thing. Like in Turkey, there was like this cult that had a deep state. In fact, they were run by a guy out of Pennsylvania. He's passed away now. And him and Erdogan had a big clash, etc. He had infiltrated the military, prosecutors, judges, even teachers. So you can, it is possible in a government. And now we're finding out from people that were inside the government. There's folks saying, ignore the president's order, ignore a deeper investigation into who shot the president, and ignore and shut down your investigation of who killed Charlie Kirk. Well, if that ain't a deep state, I don't know what is.
There's one other thing that Kent brought up that's related to all of this. So let's go to D4.
Boom. If that ain't the deep state, then my name's not, well, my name is what it is. But you get the point. When you have unelected bureaucrats actively defying presidential orders, not just once, but repeatedly across multiple high-stakes investigations, from a president's shooting to a top advisor's assassination to even the JFK files, You don't have a functioning democracy anymore. You have a shadow government. It's a cabal of entrenched power, operating outside the will of the people and even the elected leaders. They're telling us plain as day, we're in charge, not you, not your vote, and certainly not your president. It isn't some abstract theory anymore. It's being laid bare by insiders like Joe Kent. And if we don't wake up to this reality, we're just sleepwalking into a future where our government truly works against us, not for us.
They're not hiding something in the Kennedy files, in my opinion, because it's not like the assassins wrote down on this day we're going to kill JFK and they put it in a file at CIA or FBI.
Right.
Like that didn't happen. So I don't really think there's anything that's in particularly, would be earth-shattering inside the files themselves. The system doesn't want to get us used to things being rapidly declassified. They don't want a president to be able to come in and say, here's an executive order, and I said declassify it because the people demand it, and it happens like that as fast as it could happen. They don't want that to happen. They want to condition us that, like, okay, the president of the American people elected, he may have, come in and lawfully given us an order, but there's a process here. There's an interagency process. Everyone gets to check to make sure there's nothing still classified or still ongoing, even if it was from, 1963 or even further back, because again, they don't want us conditioned to, we can just have access to this information.
Let's dismantle the federal government.
No, you can't dismantle the federal government. But what you can dismantle is things like the CIA, which apparently don't work for America. That is super dangerous. When you have a CIA and potentially FBI that works for either elites within America, but not the American people, or works for a foreign government or whoever else they work for. But we can't find out because even if a president orders an investigation, they just block it. And so I want you to be clear, Joe Kent didn't say that there was nothing wrong with the JFK assassination. He said, even if there was, they wouldn't have written it down. They wouldn't have been like, oh yeah, but I remember when I was at the CIA and I murdered JFK, right? They're not gonna write that down. But even so, he's like, no, they're not gonna let you know whatever is in the files, just as a show of power. The American people are not in charge. This is not a democracy. Whoever is running the government from within the government is in charge.
So there you have it, folks. Joe Kent's revelations aren't just explosive. They're a chilling indictment of a system that seems determined to keep us in the dark. From assassinations to blocked investigations, it's clear there's a powerful force at play that doesn't answer to the American people. So tell me, what do you think? Is this just conspiracy theory nonsense? Or are we finally seeing the deep state for what it truly is? Let me know in the comments below. Hit that like button if you found this insightful, and don't forget to subscribe for more hard-hitting truths. And as always, stay vigilant, Patriots, stay vigilant.